What's the one thing you never want to lose as you get older? Your mind. For most people, the fear isn't wrinkles or weak knees, it's Alzheimer's disease. The idea of slowly losing your memory, your identity, your independence, that's what keeps people up at night. And what makes it even more unsettling is this. Alzheimer's doesn't announce itself in old age. It can begin quietly in midlife, decades before the first symptom ever appears. Here's where many people feel trapped. They believe that if Alzheimer's runs in their family, the outcome is already written. Genetics equals destiny. End of story. But that belief is wrong. The science now shows something powerful. Even people with genetic risk are not helpless. Lifestyle, especially what you eat, can dramatically influence how your brain ages. Certain dietary patterns are linked to lower rates of Alzheimer's, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and even early death. That's not theory. That's real-world data from thousands of people followed over decades. So the real question becomes, what can you actually do, starting today, that's practical and realistic? That's exactly what we're going to explore. Hi everyone. Today I want to focus on your brain because it might be the most valuable organ you own, and yet it's often the most neglected. You can't talk about health without talking about brain health. Everything you think, feel, remember, and decide depends on it. So let me ask you again, what's the one brain condition people fear the most? Alzheimer's. But what if the story doesn't begin in old age? What if it begins on your plate? What if the food you eat today quietly shapes how sharp or how fragile your brain will be 10, 20, or 30 years from now? That brings us to a simple, three-letter word that most people misunderstand: fat. The fat you eat is deeply connected to the health of your brain. This isn't surprising when you realize one critical fact. Your brain is made of nearly 60% fat. That means the quality of fat you consume isn't just fuel. It becomes structure. It becomes part of your brain itself. So the real question isn't whether fat matters. It's which fats help your brain thrive and which ones quietly harm it over time. And that's where things start to get very interesting. When you think about it, this actually makes perfect sense. The fat you eat doesn't just provide calories. It helps shape how your brain works. It influences the structure of brain cells, the connections between them, and even how resilient your brain becomes over time. That resilience affects everything: how you handle stress, how stable your mood is, how you respond emotionally, and how well you adapt to life's challenges. This isn't some soft, abstract discussion about psychology or mindset. This is biology. This is chemistry. This is about how the food you put in your body physically becomes part of your brain and determines how it functions years down the road. If you've ever asked yourself, how much control do I really have over my long-term brain health? Can I actually do anything to lower my risk of Alzheimer's? The answer may surprise you. You have far more control than you've been led to believe. So if you're ready to take that control back, let's get into it. First, we need to talk about fats specifically. Which types raise your risk of Alzheimer's and which ones may help protect your brain? Because dietary fat and Alzheimer's disease are not separate topics, they are deeply connected. Scientists wanted to answer a simple but critical question. Does the type of fat you eat change your risk of Alzheimer's disease and dementia? To find out, researchers analyzed a massive body of data, combining results from multiple clinical studies involving over 20,000 people. This kind of analysis is powerful because it looks for consistent patterns across many populations, not just one small experiment. Then they compared those with healthier fats, including monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats, especially omega-3 fatty acids commonly found in seafood. Now here's where things get interesting. When the researchers analyzed the results, one finding stood out immediately: people who consumed the highest amounts of saturated fat had a significantly higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. The risk wasn't small. Those with the highest saturated fat intake had a 39% increased risk of Alzheimer's. Let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't a vague trend or a weak association. It was a clear, measurable increase in risk linked directly to the type of fat people were eating on a regular basis. And that's just the beginning of the story. This raises an important question. Where is saturated fat actually coming from in our everyday diet? That question matters even more today because there's a growing trend around meat-heavy and carnivore-style diets. While these diets are often promoted as natural or ancestral, the reality is that diets centered on red meat tend to be extremely high in saturated fat. But red meat isn't the only source. Saturated fat also shows up in many processed meats, the kinds you'll find at the deli counter. Things like salami, bologna, sausages, and pepperoni are packed with it. Add to that fast food, fried foods, and a wide range of ultra-processed foods. Even many packaged snacks quietly contain significant amounts of saturated fat. Then there's dairy, and this is where things get nuanced. Some studies suggest that certain dairy foods may actually be linked to a slightly lower risk of dementia. So the next logical question is, why does this type of fat harm the brain in the first place? We already know that saturated fats can drive inflammation throughout the body. They increase oxidative stress, which damages DNA and disrupts normal cell function. Over time, this creates an environment where cells, including brain cells, don't perform as well as they should. Saturated fats also impair blood flow. And that's a big deal because your body contains hundreds of miles of blood vessels supplying oxygen and nutrients to vital organs. When blood flow is compromised, the brain is one of the first organs to suffer. Reduced circulation means reduced fuel, and that can quietly undermine brain performance long before symptoms appear. Now, let's talk about trans fats because the story here is even worse. People who consume the highest levels of trans fats were found to have an even greater increase in Alzheimer's risk, nearly 50% higher compared to those who ate the least. Why are trans fats so damaging? Because they don't just circulate in the bloodstream. They physically embed themselves into cell membranes, including the membranes of neurons in your brain. When that happens, the structure of the cell becomes distorted. Communication between brain cells weakens. The system becomes less efficient, less resilient, and more vulnerable to degeneration. That's exactly what we don't want. Now here's the hopeful part of the story. When researchers looked at polyunsaturated fats, especially omega-3 fatty acids, they saw the opposite effect. Omega-3s, the kinds found in fatty fish and certain whole food sources, were strongly associated with better brain outcomes. People who consumed the highest amounts of omega-3s had a 28% lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. That's not a small benefit. That's a meaningful, measurable reduction in risk linked directly to the type of fat people were eating. And this is where the conversation shifts from fear to empowerment. Here's the key takeaway, and it's worth repeating because it's that important. Omega-3 fats work in the exact opposite direction of saturated fats and trans fats. Saturated fats and trans fats push Alzheimer's risk up. Omega-3s and other beneficial polyunsaturated fats push that risk down. Two different types of fats, two completely different effects on the brain. Understanding why omega-3s are protective helps this advice really stick. Omega-3s are powerful anti-inflammatory fats. They calm inflammation throughout the entire body, including the brain. Chronic inflammation is one of the major drivers of brain aging, cognitive decline, and neurodegeneration, so reducing it is a huge win for long-term brain health. Omega-3s also protect your blood vessels. Healthy circulation matters because your brain depends on a constant supply of oxygen and nutrients. When blood flow is strong and flexible, every region of the brain gets what it needs to function optimally. Better circulation means better focus, memory, and resilience over time. There's another benefit that doesn't get talked about enough. Omega-3s actually strengthen brain cell membranes. Think of each brain cell as being surrounded by a protective outer layer, almost like a flexible but sturdy container. When that outer layer is weak or damaged, the cell becomes vulnerable. Polyunsaturated fats help reinforce that membrane, making brain cells more durable and better able to communicate efficiently with one another. That structural strength matters enormously as the brain ages. If you were paying close attention, you might be thinking, wait, there was one more type of fat in that study. And you'd be right. The researchers also examined monounsaturated fats. Interestingly, these fats turned out to be neutral when it came to Alzheimer's risk. They didn't significantly increase risk, but they didn't provide strong protection either. No dramatic harm, no dramatic benefit, just neutral. So when you zoom out and look at the big picture, over 20,000 people studied, multiple types of fat compared, and one very clear outcome measured, the message becomes hard to ignore. The type of fat you eat matters profoundly when it comes to protecting your brain from Alzheimer's disease. Now let's get practical, because knowledge without action is just entertainment. First, reduce your intake of saturated fats. That means cutting back on red meats, processed meats, fried foods, and ultra-processed foods. You don't have to eliminate them completely. Perfection isn't the goal. Consistency is. Making a deliberate effort to reduce these foods even gradually can meaningfully support your brain over time. Think of saturated fat as an occasional indulgence, not a daily staple. Second, actively prioritize omega-3s. That means less of the fats that increase risk and more of the fats that protect your brain. You can get omega-3s from supplements, and those can be helpful, but supplements are meant to top off, not replace real food. The foundation should come from what you eat. Fatty fish are the classic sources: salmon, sardines, anchovies, mackerel, but the list doesn't stop there. Many types of seafood commonly eaten in Mediterranean and Asian diets also contain meaningful amounts of omega-3s. Fish like cod, halibut, and hake count. Shellfish count too: shrimp, oysters, clams, squid, even lobster. These foods are not only delicious, they're part of dietary patterns associated with long-term brain health. The goal isn't restriction. The goal is smarter substitution, choosing fats that help your brain stay strong for decades to come. If you're plant-based and thinking you don't eat anything that comes from animals, that's absolutely fine. You can still support your brain with omega-3s, you just get them a little differently. Instead of consuming omega-3s directly, you eat their precursors. These are plant compounds your body can convert into omega-3 fatty acids on its own. Foods like walnuts, chia seeds, and flax seeds are excellent sources. They provide alpha-linolenic acid, which your body can transform into the omega-3s your brain needs. So the strategy stays the same: reduce saturated fats and increase beneficial fats, whether they come directly from food or are made by your body from plant sources. For your everyday cooking oil, choose extra virgin olive oil. That means moving away from butter and cutting back on refined vegetable oils, and instead making extra virgin olive oil your go-to. It contains far less saturated fat than butter, and yes, butter tastes good. We all know that, but extra virgin olive oil tastes wonderful too, and it brings powerful health benefits along with it. Beyond healthy fats, extra virgin olive oil is rich in protective plant compounds called polyphenols. These include molecules like oleocanthal and hydroxytiazole. These compounds help lower inflammation, protect blood vessels in the brain, improve circulation, and support healthy nerve function. That combination, healthy fats plus protective polyphenols, makes extra virgin olive oil one of the best everyday choices you can make for your brain. Now here's where the story takes an interesting turn. Up to this point, we've talked about saturated fats as something to minimize, and that's still true for most of them. But science sometimes surprises us. Researchers have discovered that one specific saturated fat may actually be beneficial for brain health. This is a perfect example of why nutrition is not black and white. Nature doesn't operate on simple good versus bad rules. The details matter. The nuance matters. And when science reveals something unexpected, we need to be flexible enough to update our thinking. So what is this unusual saturated fat? It's called C15, short for pentadecanoic acid. This is a 15-carbon saturated fatty acid that was identified less than a decade ago by researchers studying long-lived marine mammals. They initially found it while studying dolphins, animals known for their remarkable metabolic and neurological resilience. Because dolphins eat a fish-based diet, researchers began looking for this compound in foods humans eat as well. They discovered small amounts of C15 in certain foods, including fatty fish and select dairy products. One notable source is Pecorino Romano cheese, a traditional aged cheese often used sparingly in cooking. Moderation matters here. You don't want large amounts of saturated fat, but what's fascinating is that this specific fatty acid appears to behave very differently from others. Researchers now believe pentadecaenoic acid may actually be an essential fatty acid, meaning your body cannot make it on its own. You have to get it through your diet. What does this unusual saturated fat actually do? The research suggests that C15 plays a role in supporting mitochondrial function, the energy systems inside your cells. Think of mitochondria as tiny battery packs that power everything your body does. When your cells have energy, you have energy. But as we age, those cellular batteries don't perform as well. Damaged mitochondria accumulate, the system gets less efficient, and it's like trying to run a flashlight on half-dead batteries. The light still turns on, but it's weaker and unreliable. C15 may help support mitochondrial function, allowing cells to run more smoothly. This matters enormously for the brain, which is one of the most energy-hungry organs in the body. C15 also appears to reduce inflammation, similar to what we see with omega-3 fats, and inflammation is tied to many chronic diseases of aging, metabolic issues, cardiovascular disease, and potentially neurodegeneration as well. Additionally, C15 may help stabilize cell membranes. Stronger membranes mean stronger, more stable cells, and in the brain, stability is everything because neurons need to transmit signals reliably for decades. In observational studies, people with higher levels of C15 in their blood have been associated with lower rates of type 2 diabetes, lower risk of cardiovascular problems, and even lower risk of early death. The pattern suggests this fatty acid may be a marker or a contributor to better overall health. Where do you get C15? From food? It shows up in fatty fish like salmon and sardines. Some dairy fats contain it as well, though moderation matters because they also contain other saturated fats. For years, full-fat dairy was treated like the enemy. But if C15 truly turns out to be beneficial or even essential, then avoiding all dairy fat may have caused people to miss out on something their body actually needs. This doesn't mean you should eat unlimited full-fat dairy. It means the science is forcing us to be more precise and more thoughtful about our choices. Now let me share the most important message of all. The Mediterranean diet protects the brain, and remarkably, it does so even if you have a genetic risk for Alzheimer's disease. There's a gene called ApoE4. If you carry it, your risk of developing Alzheimer's is higher. Often, it runs in families. Many people believe that if they have this gene, the outcome is already decided, that it's game over. That belief is wrong. Researchers analyzed data from thousands of people followed over decades. They examined who developed Alzheimer's, what they ate, their genetic risk, and biological markers related to brain health. Here's what they found. Even individuals with the highest genetic risk, those who inherited this gene from both parents, had better brain health outcomes if they followed a Mediterranean-style diet. Better memory, healthier brain biomarkers, lower overall risk. In other words, genes are not destiny. Why does this diet work so well? Because the Mediterranean diet is rich in exactly what the brain needs. Anti-inflammatory fats like omega-3 polyphenols that protect cells from oxidative damage, foods that support circulation, immunity, and the gut microbiome. This dietary pattern strengthens the body's natural defense and repair systems. It doesn't just protect the brain from damage. It helps the brain repair itself. Colorful vegetables provide carotenoids that act like protective shields for neurons. Extra virgin olive oil and seafood improve blood flow to the brain. Over decades, these small daily choices add up to something profound. So here's the takeaway, and it's genuinely good news: eating in a Mediterranean style isn't restrictive, it's enjoyable, it's sustainable, and it's one of the most powerful ways we know to protect your brain as you age. Let me share how I personally approach food, because this is what makes it sustainable. I eat what I call a Mediterranean Asian-style diet. When I am planning dinner, whether I am standing in the grocery store or sitting at my desk thinking about meals, I ask myself a simple question. Do I feel like Mediterranean flavors today or Asian flavors? Honestly, you can't go wrong with either. Both styles emphasize fresh ingredients, healthy fats, vegetables, herbs, seafood, and balance. Most importantly, they're based on enjoyment and food quality, not fear. That's the mindset I want you to adopt. Don't eat out of anxiety. Eat with curiosity and pleasure. Here's a practical rule that makes everything easier. Build your meals around the produce section. Start with colorful vegetables, fruits, herbs, whatever is fresh and seasonal. If you see something unfamiliar, don't panic, pull out your phone, search it, tap recipe or video, and let someone show you how to use it. That's how people learn to cook now, and it works beautifully. Explore the middle aisles of the grocery store too, because there are real treasures there when you know what to look for. Things like dried beans, dried herbs, extra virgin olive oil, tinned fish, dark chocolate, whole leaf tea, and healthy tree nuts. These are staples in Mediterranean and Asian cooking. For grains, make whole grains your default. Thin coats, barley, quinoa, brown rice. Simple swaps like these add up over time. Then there's seafood. No, not everyone loves it, but I encourage you to stay curious. Visit the seafood counter, talk to the fishmonger, and see if you can work seafood into your meals 2-3 times a week. If you're unsure how to cook something, a quick video can turn something unfamiliar into something easy and enjoyable. At the same time, cut back on red meat. You don't need to eliminate it entirely, just make it less frequent. But I do strongly recommend avoiding processed meats altogether. They've been classified as carcinogenic, and they simply don't support long-term health. Here's the empowering part. Even if you have a family history of Alzheimer's, even if you carry genes that increase your risk, eating the right foods, in the right pattern, prepared in healthy ways, can put real power back into your hands when it comes to protecting your brain. Of course, food isn't the only factor. Brain health also depends on movement. Stay physically active. Sleep, make it a priority. Stress, do your best to manage it. None of this is perfect or easy. But when you're mindful and intentional, these habits work together to protect your brain over time. And remember this, brain health starts at home. You are the one who makes these choices every day. Your healthcare team is there to support you, but they can't eat for you. They can't sleep for you. The daily decisions are yours. If you found this helpful, share it with someone who might benefit from it. I'll see you in the next one.